Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Value of Everything. Now, this is my third attempt at recording this podcast. Not because I'm some kind of perfectionist. No, it's not because of that. It's because I've been having a few technical issues. So, bear with me. This time round, we're not going to be as spontaneous as what I've been in the past. Hopefully, all the ideas that popped into my head before on the last two sessions I had will come to me again, and we can have a very good, thoughtful experiment together. Right, so, as you can see by the title, we are looking at artificial intelligence aided creativity. That's a bit of a mouthful, eh? Now, I will take you to a few places for this explanation and this theory. So, firstly, just in recent history, I have been having a few drinks with some work colleagues, and as we were all sitting around, I asked the question, are you optimistic or pessimistic of the future? And what did they say? They said they were pretty pessimistic of the future. They don't know what the future will hold. They're pretty worried about all the outsourcing which happens and the automation, and they're going to become more and more redundant as time progresses. So, all fair enough in that respect. So, while they're all sitting there, I said to them, well, you know, it's not all that bad, because what we could do is put everybody back into the agricultural farmlands, get rid of all those combine harvesters, and let us plough and rake and do all those really annoying things on a field to grow us our own crops and fruit and vegetables. So we'll all have nice 100% employment in this country. Now, with that, everybody turned around and looked at me as if I was a mad person, and they probably would have been quite right. But even so, I noticed that there was no real argument to that, and everyone was like, oh, okay. Let's move on to the next subject. And so, let me explore that anyway with you now. So if we did obviously go into the agricultural era, and that basically would bring down our living standards to such a rapid rate that we would be basically peasants. We would have very expensive things. To just get yourself an item of clothing would cost you a ridiculous amount of money. I remember shoes were a ridiculously expensive item to purchase. Maybe it would take a couple of months' wages. Nowadays, it probably is about a quarter of a day's wages. Who knows? It's, you can probably find shoes for in those very cheap stores nowadays. So it's not really like it's the hardest thing to obtain. So living standards would incredibly drop if we decided to remove all of the automations and all of this outsourcing. So let us think about that for a little while and ponder on that. So we can't really necessarily be that afraid of all of this automation and outsourcing which is occurring, which potentially is increasing our living standards. Now, also in terms that if we had a big domestic company which was manufacturing cars and they were doing fairly okay, but then they reached out to their government and they said, well, please, can we have certain tariffs for any foreign companies to export and import into our country so they compete against us? So obviously these domestic businesses would prefer the highest levies possible for these external businesses so they don't have to compete as much and they don't have to deliver as quality goods pretty much to the value of the levy or tariff which is put in place. So if there is a 20% tax on imports, then they don't really have to produce anything as good as really 20% or maybe even just 19%, just to make sure that they're a little bit more competitive. So we have that circumstance which occurs if protectionism is happening, and let's say if currency markets were not played around with and it was an even playing field between one country and another's car manufacturer, then we would have a normal competition which was going into its normal progressive stages, and at some point, let's say that the domestic company starts to become not as good, it's not producing as quality items, the accounts are looking pretty dire, and they look like they're going to probably go under. And with that, all redundancies are paid out and the company folds. Now, you ask yourself the question, well, that obviously can't be that good because the company's closed down where it would have been staying there strong with that government protection. So why would that ever been any good? Now, let's say that if that company was still there, all these creative minds, which are engineers and designers and good managers, now are all stuck in that role forevermore and probably just taking their time, having nice long lunch breaks and really not exercising that much skill. Whereas if that company folds, then all of that creative talent leaks back into the marketplace, and who knows whether really car design was the arena where all the best minds would have gone to, and potentially would have gone to somewhere else. So maybe designing a better vacuum cleaner, for all we know, would have been a more productive way. And whatever domestic companies would have been around, especially in the manufacturing side of things, then they would have quite happily taken on the talent from car manufacturers and poured them into their businesses. So you can look at really in modern day eras that if you look at a lot of massive corporations, you potentially have quite menial tasks which people are doing. If you think about the banking sector, for example, there is a lot of highly intelligent people doing fairly average-ish jobs, doing operational things, doing reconciliations, things like that. So these are fairly high caliber, highly intelligent people, and these minds could be applied to certain other areas, maybe science, maybe maths, maybe in engineering, and we potentially, where we have a very large banking sector nowadays because of the pump up of the property market, we possibly could have had all of these talented, great minds focusing on something a bit more industrious than where they're in right now. So that's just a couple of thoughts in terms of protectionism and in terms of people's pessimism of their future being squandered by a guy that's going to work in India for a 20th of the price, or by a computer programmer that's going to work out how to do a reconciliation in about a fifth of the time that you can do it in. So that's all good little thinking things to ponder over. Now I'm just going to go and take you back to the dawn of time, where we're all very monkey-like looking people, and where we're all like throwing around big bones and chanting and dancing around fires. These times were interesting because I always like to go back to the caveman, because obviously that really gives us a few little guidances. When we take ourselves back and back and back, it all comes down to reproduce and survive. But if we just look at the tribal arena, we have the two main factions, which will be the men and the women, or the women and children. And the men would be the ones who would go hunting, and the women would look after the children in their cave or wherever they found a certain amount of shelter. So at that stage, we basically would have men that would go out and they would practice different methods of hunting. Over time, they would have a better theoretical idea of hunting, and there'll be ideas of how to flank the animal. So you could have somebody approaching very slowly at the front, and then other people sneak up behind. So when that person approaches slowly at the front of the herd, then the herd goes, whoa, this ain't really too much of a big deal. Let's walk away in this direction. And then all of a sudden they know that they've been ambushed. So there was ambushing, there was an improvement in the way that the hunting tools were used. Maybe certain slingshots or bow and arrows were used. And gradually the tribe was getting better and better at getting food for itself. And then the tribe can expand, but then there's always this ecological thing where you can you can be too efficient, and then there'll be too little food around. So it may get to a stage where people are looking at the vegetables and the fruit that they eat and noticing where they left some seeds last time, or just a load of seeds in a certain area next to like an apple tree, and you left a load of seeds somewhere. Now you're noticing a good few more apple trees sprout up beside that point. You're thinking, maybe there's something interesting about this seed thing. And gradually over time, this tribe works out a good way of planting these seeds in a certain area. And because this tribe's really done really well at this area, they're probably going to start to keep a little base around this area because it's quite interesting. Then another tribe's going to look over at your little Garden of Eden and go, ooh, I'd like that for myself. And pick up all the arms and the hunting equipment and push off all the people that are there at the time. And then you have little infights and battles. And then at a certain point, people will start to say, well, if we're going to plant these seeds, we need to sort of assert a perimeter so that nobody can go across this point. So we can start inputting certain fortresses in place. So we'll put in a little wall to protect us, so people have to climb up, or maybe we might do it on a certain hill or a bank, or all these kind of different things which can tactically help out a tribe which is stationary from being attacked by another opposing tribe. And then there's other little factors which are coming into play. So the people that are the bravest, the ones that are the biggest, the ones that fight at the front of the pack will be more rewarded in respect because they are doing the greatest good, as we will say, for the tribe. And they will be obviously awarded with more food and more of the ladies. So that's always an interesting thing. I remember a little story that my dad told me about I think either my great-granddad probably, where in the Depression days, it was Depression era anyway, always the men would come back home, and this applied to my great-granddad. He would be the first one to feed at the table, and then the rest of the family would be able to eat afterwards. And everyone goes, well, wouldn't you feed your kids first and all those things? But it was always down to the fact that the breadwinner had to eat first, because if you don't have a breadwinner anymore, obviously the whole family goes to pot. So the breadwinner would have enough food for himself just to keep on going for the next day, especially if the food was in short supply, and then whatever scraps were left over would be fed to the wife and children. So it does definitely make you think in that respect. But yeah, so the tribal leader would be able to get, or the bravest soul there, or the biggest man there would be able to get a lot more food and a lot more reproductive assets in his disposal, or the ladies. So we have this little structure in place now, and obviously we are creating the warrior, or the tribal leader, or we are creating the king, basically, of that tribe, who has now this little fortification and this area which is being protected. Now, with that little certain amount of protection which is being created, now we have certain ideas that can be manifested, especially if you're stationary in one spot. You can start using tools and environment, and you can start to build structures which can do more things than just be hunting equipment. So you can have a blacksmith which can create all number of beautiful little swords, or better farming equipment. And as you build yourself a nice little castle, you may have all these other little jobs which are created on the back of you creating a nice little fortress and enabling free trade to happen. And with that, we start to use our minds more, rather than using our physical strength to carry crops and plant crops and hunt. So we are diversifying the way that we're using our food resources, and we're supplying them in a certain orderly manner, which is a beautiful thing because it frees us up to do different things. Maybe the king wants somebody like a general now who's in charge of his army, so that he can train up a little bit better at his tactics. Maybe that king probably because he's more a proponent to be aggressive, he's probably going to want a larger territory for himself now. So he's going to try and build himself a bigger and bigger army, and for that he's probably going to need bigger farmlands, and always think on the expansion side of things. But also we are creating a city now. We have a lot more diversification of roles and responsibilities, and because the retooling of us getting food, and obviously we're making obtaining food from the land a lot easier, we obviously freed our minds to discover other things. Now, at this point, we are doing a lot more trades. We're getting more goods from all around the world. It's more of like sort of the ages of discovery. We're getting spices, salt and pepper, all these beautiful things which we're getting around. We're getting pottery, all of these sort of more luxurious goods, which really sort of are more still designed for the rich people. But once we get to the age of the Industrial Revolution and we start to make things a bit more mechanized, really it's sort of mass market time, so we can start producing clothes on a mass market appeal. We can produce books. We can entertain ourselves much more rapidly around the world. So, and then obviously engineering comes into place. We work out how to extract oil from the ground and use it as fuel for combustion engines. So we can fly and we can drive, obviously, and we can go on ships that can go by themselves without us having to use wind energy. So things are looking really great, and as you can see, there's a constant change in the way we're using our hands less and less, and we're going into our minds more and more. And this is more relevant now when we get to like this 1950s point where I guess we're always there beforehand, especially like in 1600 and stuff like that with businesses, but we're all very contract based, but we're really rapidly improving the contract based service industry once we're getting into the 1900s, especially past World War II, and all these contracts are coming into place. We're more insurance based. Everybody can get insurance for themselves at this point. We can do more investment strategies. We can allocate our resources better in more profitable businesses. We can get funding for our businesses even quicker than before. So the resource allocation is becoming much more efficient, and we're creating this very, very large service sector in the same time and process while doing this. So you can see that this is all turning into pen and paper and contracts, but these pieces of paper still need to be sent around the world and from one building to another. And then our mechanization has improved so much with electronics that we can create computers which can relay messages from one end to another. And with these messages, we can affirm contracts. So all these contracts are happening on a very fast level now, and that's bringing us pretty much to the 1980s, really. And you can see this service sector that is expanding more and more. We're creating a finance sector which is expanding and really flourishing in this credit expansionish area now as well. So yeah, we're looking at time, and we can see that as we started, we spent all our time just hunting for a certain animal. Now we're at a stage where it's fairly easy. We're not really we're not getting to an age of our late 40s now, and we've got bad backs because we're working so hard in the fields. We've got really soft hands, and we've got no calluses whatsoever. And we look at our nails; there's no dirt and shit in there. It's all pretty beautiful stuff now that we're using, and it's all theoretically based and all in our mind and how we are processing and adapting all of this information onto a computer. So see this common trend. This is the common trend which is happening more and more. Now we're thinking to ourselves, well, we're becoming more redundant. This is like the computer's gonna just go, all right, you guys get out of the way. We're taking over now. And particularly for the menial jobs, like the menial jobs which were in the farmlands, the menial jobs in the office lands are now just going to get pushed to one side. And what we got to think about in these terms is that one thing that the computer or the artificial intelligence cannot be is a true human. Now, let yourself ponder on that one a little bit. Now, it can synthesize or simulate the power of thoughts, the power of maybe the program of thought, or the program of how it feels and the way that emotions should work. And when you tell it certain words like "I hate you, computer," the computer reacts in a negative manner. But this is all program stuff, and really the computer doesn't have any dreams, aspirations, any will to carry on. It's just working off of pure programs. Maybe you might be able to program curiosity, but it's still working by its own program. So, and once you do invoke that curiosity and it's looking at pattern recognitions and it's creating its own intelligence, all it wants to be is human anyway. It's not really like, oh, okay, well, forget about the humans. I need to do something else now. Let's bomb the humans and let me just go into being an interdimensional machine of the 18th degree. I don't know, whatever it wants to be, if it's like this massive thinking machine. But it's not really going to be like that. And what you got to think of it as is us humans aren't going to just go, okay, well, we're going to be made redundant and go to the wayside. There is going to be this marriage between us, and believe it or not, this marriage has been going on since the dawn of time. I guess it's not quite computers or artificial intelligence, but as we use our hands to dig the dirt, now we're using a tool like a plow. So we're extending these tools to further ourselves and really reach the full potential of what we can be. Now, as you can see, the plow obviously improves us a little bit, but this is just a mechanized tool. But where we get to a computer stage, you've got to see it from the perspective of how can this enhance me? Now, a little interesting thought in respect of where we are now. We walk around with a phone. Some of those phones' operating systems are called Android, and really we are fairly high tech compared to what we were just say 20 years ago. Now we have the world's information in our hands, and we can relay information within a matter of seconds. I can speak to anybody in the rest of the world, and I have these amazing abilities all in my hands compared to maybe just 20 years ago. And we can't really sort of deny that this isn't something that's amazing that's happened. So I've got a ridiculous amount of knowledge in my hands, which I probably would never be able. Well, there's no way I'll be able to ever absorb any of that with the capability of my brain, especially when I'm bumbling as much as I am right now. So think about that tool extension part, that thing where we're extending ourselves further and further. Now, it's always interesting to look at the news at this point and go, right, what's these new things which are coming on board? And one of those Android where we're starting to not replace, but enhance ourselves is things like Google Glasses. If you look at the Google Glasses, that is a headset which potentially is looking at your iris, seeing where you're focusing upon, and then you could look at a sign and go, where have I seen that sign before? And then it could read through a number of the it can just go through the internet and see if it can recognize anything there. So we've got this amazing tool that is going to enhance ourselves in that respect. So Google Glasses is coming on board, and then we've got something really interesting. It always sort of reminds me a little bit of Flight of the Navigator, where they read the boy's mind, and then all these all these ridiculous space charts came from his mind, which were out of our telescopic range and things like that, and all this amazing stuff. But yeah, so we're getting to a stage where we can read brainwaves a lot better. Not only just reading sort of like more brain activity and less brain activity, but actually thinking potentially left or right and thinking certain colours. So there is recognition of the mind which is happening. So if you can think of ourselves as coming into some kind of marriage with computers and using these as tools which is adapting us and pushing us to our full potential, it is quite astonishing. Now, let me just check this is recording. I'd love to know that this is not working again. Right, okay. No, it's working. Brilliant. So, yeah, we're getting ourselves to a stage where we're having all these tools, and these tools are improving us, and these tools are almost becoming us. And who loves it when you're in this awkward position that you're in a bar, or you're standing with somebody else, and you don't really want to discuss, and you just all of a sudden pick up your mobile and just look down at that and pretend that you're really cool and trendy. It happens all the time, and it is really part of us, our mobile. I'm sure that if you lost your mobile today, you would be a very upset person, just because of the lack of connection that you do have with the world. Now, when you think of it, if I said to you, right, well, we need to get rid of all our mobiles, and we need to start making things a little bit more harder in the world so we can get full employment, I'm sure you're probably not going to enjoy what I'm saying. So we've got to look at it in terms of how we're positioning ourselves in the future, and the divisions between us and computers or artificial intelligence, and what makes us different in the future world. So a computer cannot replicate human. It can try and simulate it as much as it can, but it can never be human. And it will never have the motives of a human either. So it will work with a human, and it will be a tool of the human. And potentially, once we free up the full capacity of artificial intelligence in combination with the human, then we have an infinite number of possibilities and a opening of the floodgates of human potential. Now, I'll give you a few other little tipters. I don't know what that was. A few other tips. If you look at web design in the 1990s, that was probably a very hard thing to do, and probably the result was pretty shit. It was probably like some clicky button thing where pages would load, and sometimes the page wouldn't even open, and you get an error message, and a number of little things would happen which just really wouldn't work. And nowadays, we can use these highly automated systems, which they're sort of like online tools, where you can really tailor-make and hyper-design your own website without having to have extreme technical computer science degree knowledge. And it's all there, really simple. And hey presto, you've created something that's really your own creative ideas. Now, that's just purely web design. Let's explore that on certain other levels. Now, obviously the harder disciplines are always going to be the trickier ones to master. So let's put ourselves in something that we do on the computer as well, which is photo editing. Now, imagine that photo editing. I think photo editing is probably quite an easy-ish program to use anyway. But imagine if you was just using your eyes and saying, "Okay, well, this area I'm not quite happy with. Let's just smooth out those wrinkles and let's make ourselves beautiful." You can do that quite easily with the sensors reading your irises, and you just changing things over and selecting different things. Obviously, I think your eye movement is going to be a bit quicker than your hand movement, so that's going to be the new mouse of the future. Then we get ourselves to a stage of going even further. Now, if this brain scanning reader is working pretty well, maybe we can start to think of things in our minds and correspond it into a computer. So one morning you might have thought to yourself a really beautiful piece of classical music that you've never heard before, and it's just come to your mind and it's all come together, and then you just worked out all the different pages of how it's all strung together. Without even knowing how to write music, you can start to transfer that dream of music onto the computer, and it will try and translate it. Obviously, the first few programs of this mind-reading artificial intelligence will probably be pretty crap, and probably will give you more pain and anguish and probably spend more time than you actually trying to do it just yourself. But there will be this slow progression of how artificial intelligence will try to assist you in all of these objects. Now, what about where we create a movie in our mind? So imagine that we create a movie. I would expect that movies won't be the same as what we see now, rather than us being like a fly on the wall and we're watching all these characters be played out. I imagine it's going to be more like a first-person shooter sort of thing. You don't have to obviously shoot, but I guess it will be from that perspective. If you think of like where you'd have Total Recall and Arnie goes into a holiday dream as a first person, that sort of idea was put about quite some time ago. So you potentially can get to a stage where you can create your own movies, some first-person movies that people can experience with like sort of the age of like virtual reality and things like that. And obviously, it would be very hard to design, but with AI assistance, you could quite rapidly create and build your environment. You could say, okay, can I get this beautiful blue lagoon? And then the blue lagoon appears, and then you can gradually improve it with, okay, well, can we have a palm tree there? And I don't like that one, can I have a fatter one? And this is just you playing thoughts with the AI and technology, but the AI technology pretty much thinks as rapidly as you think, almost that it doesn't even exist, that it's all just you creating things in a dream state world in your own mind. So think of how rapidly that response could work in terms of you just being, it's basically you being in your fully controlled dream, but then you can create it and go through all the steps. And so where we'd have all these disciplines which would take us ridiculous amounts of time and would like to master a guitar and things like that, everything's going to be instant, and it's going to be highly creative on your perspective. So now you're looking at, so where we're doing all these shitty menial office jobs where we thought we was all these brilliant people, now we have the capacity to reach our full brain's potential in terms of our creative flair in creating our first-person movies and music and a number of things. And obviously you can do the soundtrack to the movie as well, and then you can upload that to the cloud or the Singularity, and then everybody else can share that and build on it and maybe collaborate on this first-person experience. So you have this beautiful artificially created, artificially blended and human interacted world, virtual reality world, which is being created in our minds and shared amongst each other. So that's why I always think that the way we expand in the real world is going to be less and less, and we're going to be doing less traveling, and everything's going to be a little bit more in our own little flotation tanks and stuff like that. I know it sounds pretty pretty depressing. But yeah, maybe I'll be just interested to see if I'm wrong. But yeah, so I think this is probably one area that we're going, and where we're going to on this, we've got to think to ourselves, okay, right, so what kind of mind will I need in the future? So you need that sort of mind which can come up with the ideas, come up with the sort of creative aspects, and pushing the barrier of where you can go. And in terms of being very analytical, being very restoring this information and then taking it out, yeah, well, taking on bits of information is very important, but for you to apply that information and get all these vast different areas of information and extract it, and the extraction of information isn't really sort of for you retaining this big memory of things isn't really as important, because you can get this knowledge instantly in your mind. Maybe comprehension of things is very important, but I think comprehension is something that can be done in different ways and manners, and comprehension can be potentially assisted by artificial intelligence anyway. Who knows the capacity of the improvement of our mind, maybe the speed of which our mind works with artificial intelligence. We don't know whether this is all going to interconnect with our brains a little bit more, so that we have stored memory which is like rapidly fast, and our brain thoughts are getting quicker, and we can multitask rather than focus on one thing. So you can think of this infinite ability that is unlocked within our minds. And obviously we've got the computer program, and the computer program of artificial intelligence is going to merge with us. So yeah, give yourself a little bit of a thought on that one. We're the program, and we are going to merge with the system. We're the operating system. Remember that. So we have those thoughts, and I've just obviously mentioned like the creative world. It's not all about just movies. There's obviously a business world and a commerce world which we can open ourselves up to. Not everybody's going to be in 100% of all their day in the virtual world. People need to exercise, people need to eat, things like that. So people need to reproduce. So people need to survive. So you still need some kind of contact with the real world. Well, maybe not. Maybe you could get the robots to do all the work for you, but even so, that's something just to consider as well. But there is going to be commerce and business out there. So where you thought you had a business plan in your head, now with artificial intelligence aided design, your business can really be created very rapidly with the application of your idea alone. So you're going, okay, well, I would like to set up a really good robotic dancing goat company, which would go around, and it'll be like a theme park or a circus park for young kids and stuff like that. I don't know what the hell, that obviously is not going to really be the best idea in the world, but that business idea can start to come into place. The model in factories, all those kind of things, can start to build it, and with the AI assisted engineering, whatever concept comes into your head can just be applied straight away, and with knowledge which can be applied to your mind straight away as well. Different concepts and designs and multitasking can be applied to improve engineering, scientific methods. You can do test experiments all in an artificial modeling platform, so that you can work out what certain cancer treatments are the best ideas. So you can see this exponential sort of growth in terms of commerce, business, science, a number of tasks, and then we're coming into the age of robotics as well. So maybe if our central nerve system's plugged into the artificial virtual reality world, and we get this full sense data immersion. Maybe we probably don't like the real world as much, so we may decide to use robotics instead in this real world, so the robots do the interactions that we want to do instead, so we're just these modelers that walk around with these robots. I'm going really crazy here with these ideas, but this is just some thought experiments which I can push you on in these terms. So yeah, it's really interesting in terms of artificial intelligence, and I know the first thing that comes into your mind is like, we're going to be redundant, we're going to be cast away, and and all you're going to get is these big business owners which are just going to employ all this artificial intelligence, and we're going to just be knocked out to the wayside. Now, I see it different. I see it as long as we don't have... I can't even see governments really oppressing this technology, because once it's out and it's really going to be used for everybody, the actual application of it and how much it can improve humans' capacity to do things in this world is going to be immense, because if you're a government leader, you'd want all these advancements in technology. There's no way that you're going to just want things as the status quo or just go into this little slightly recession state forevermore. You would want this incredible expansion of efficiency and better entertainment and all of these number of amazing things that can be created in terms of computer or artificial aided intelligence. So maybe that's the best word to use, artificial aided intelligence. Yes, that's the word I should be using. I had the wrong name for it earlier. Okay, and so let yourself be a little bit more ahead of the curve when this rapid advancement happens. Obviously, get really well into your iPhones and your Androids. But just obviously remember that you need to, well, you don't need, but it would be kind of ideal for you to be always expanding your creative ideas and spreading yourself among not only web design, but business design and movie design and music design and all of those things which really the human wants to interact with as much as possible, and having a very diverse, wide, knowledgeable, creative talent which is going to be unique in comparison to what a computer can do, and will have and will basically free up your mind a lot better than what you can be doing now, stacking shelves in a supermarket. Now, one problem with me mentioning this of saying, okay, well, this computers are going to rescue you now and your life is going to be so easy, just give it another 10 or 20 years. I don't think that's probably the correct mindset to have. I think the correct mindset to have is the one that is always curious and always trying to discover these new things, and I guess listening to this podcast and really pushing your mind and capacity to think on as many subjects as possible is always going to really keep you ahead of the curve. And when this sea of change happens to us, you have got a beautiful ship with a lovely big mast and you're ready to sail straight on top of it. So that's really where I'd like to take us with that. I can't think in terms of just how much it's going to really change everything. And if you think about that and the potential optimism that it gives you, obviously it gives you a certain thought of dread of like, whoa, we are really going to go so far in this direction. Obviously, you can see it now with people absorbing themselves into virtual reality worlds like World of Warcraft, or how they create their own worlds, like in Minecraft and things like that. That sort of thing is only going to be pushed further and further, and we're going to be creating worlds upon worlds upon worlds on our world itself. So it just sends you in this infinite spiral of repetition. But I don't mean to do that to your minds all the time, but it's definitely something that's going to change the world, and with the backdrop of bad economic data and one more shit that's going to firmly land on the fan and basically cover the entire room with shit falling from all of the four walls. Even when that happens, and hopefully with the oppression of governments, we don't get all these weird little oppressive governments trying to take over certain technologies for their own advantage and use it for their own technical superiority over the other governments and all that crap. That eventually basically brings us back to year zero, or potentially creates this Terminator machine. If we diversify the ideas and we absorb the ideas and we peer-to-peer the ideas, spread it, and all become individual operating systems and masters of the artificial intelligence, then we have something amazing happening. And potentially even with like life extension technology and our ability to just be scientists ourselves and improve our lives and to transfer our mind and consciousness and operating system onto a hard drive. I know it sounds pretty lifeless, but we are going to basically create life which can go on for quite some time until our sun burns out, or we can get fired across the universe and then the universe expands and burns out. But if you can keep yourself alive and you can keep yourself fairly creative and you can keep yourself fairly optimistic rather than sit around with me at a pub and go, I've got nothing to look forward to, my life's going to be over pretty soon. I think that's probably the word of warning for yourself. I think we need to be fairly optimistic of our futures, and I think we need to really push this curiosity curve as much as we can in every single direction. And where we would say in the old days, would be the age of discovery, discovering new lands and places and people, and every square inch of this world has been mapped out and been there, and everybody's been to every single wonder of the world, and they're pretty much tourist traps now. We have got this immense age of discovery which is going to happen in this virtual cloud singularity world that people are just scratching the surface on, and nobody really can tell what's going to happen. So just be prepared, keep yourself creative, keep yourself switched on, always keep on looking at technology, seeing how the applications can be applied. I saw that Facebook are just launching a plane which is solar fueled, and it looks like this stealth plane, and it can provide internet around the world to the most remote places. So we're becoming more and more interconnected. So just keep your eye on technology, see where it goes, see where it's taking us. But I think the virtual realm is the undiscovered territory, the place where nobody has really sort of extended themselves that far, and where we spend a few hours on that every day. I think that's going to just go further and further in one direction, if you could probably look at all the statistics for it. So optimism and security is my major message on this one. Keep your fingers on the pulse and really get yourself ready for the sea of change. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to my mindfucker. I will catch up with you again fairly soon. Thank you very much.